What a delight to have so many powerful women on stage together. Can you hear me okay? All right. First of all, it is such a rare opportunity to talk to an enterprise at the scale of Walmart. And so the complexity of what you're dealing with, the kinds of decisions that you have to make affect millions of people. So I would like to start with first an understanding of the roles that you have within the company, how you work together, and an understanding around how Walmart is strategically positioning itself in the realm of e-commerce, specifically around what you've been working on, which is online grocery.
Yeah. Sure. So hi, I'm Lucinda Newcomb, as they said, VP of Discovery and Personalization. What on earth is that? So I lead a product team, and we are, as I like to say, we're responsible for everything that helps her decide to give us her money. So homepage, search, product page, discovery, personalization, reviews, user-generated content. But really, it's our job to make it easier and faster for our time-starved, busy families to find what they want, even before they knew they wanted it. So I lead the product side of things, partner very closely with my good friend Aanan over here. I like to say we need to share a brain most days. Because really it is my team's job to figure out what should we be building, but we couldn't do that without working so closely with our engineering partners to figure out what is possible, and really working together to ideate, figure out where can we push the boundaries, and figure out how are we going to bring things to life. So I'll let Aanan introduce herself, and then I think we'll address the strategic advantage.
Strategy question, yes, yeah. So, hey everyone, my name is Aanan, Contractor. You already got I run the engineering, and my role is really across, I would say, customer experience as a whole. So busy, time-starved family, they have a choice. They can shop, in any channel they like, whether it's really our Walmart.com, they're shopping for groceries, they're using the app, or they are making a store trip. And how do we make their shopping experience as easy as possible as they are shopping inside the store using our mobile apps? So all that breadth of end-to-end customer experience engineering comes alive, part of this organization. And I'll start, in terms of the number of customers that we touch that you call out. It's actually 165 million customers shopping with Walmart every week.
Can you imagine? Imagine that amount of data and frequency. So that's a real opportunity to build a relationship with your customers.
Yes, and these customers actually live within 10 miles radius, right, of any Walmart store. And then they have 24/7 access to our site and the app. So, their shopping experiences are as localized as they can be, as well as globalized, in terms of the capabilities that we can use.
I think to add to that, e-commerce is it's a drop in the bucket relative to the breadth of Walmart and our revenues. We are number one, Fortune 1 for revenue, and $516 billion last fiscal year, right? And e-commerce is such a small part of that, and so because our stores have really been our bread and butter for so many years. But what's so interesting is now we're living in an omni-channel world. She doesn't just say, oh, I'm only an online shopper, or, oh, I'm only going to go into the stores. And what's so perfect for Walmart is that it is in online grocery that those two worlds truly collide. And we have such a phenomenal use case for why it makes sense to bring online together with the stores and really be able to solve that end-to-end customer journey. And it's something where we think that we have we're the number one grocer in the US, which we in the Bay Area forget because, what Aanan mentioned, the 90% of the country is within 10 miles, we're not in most of the Bay Area. But the fact is that we are the number one grocer in the US. That's an incredible opportunity, especially around fresh and frozen, where we've had 57 years of perfecting the supply chain around how you get groceries into the stores and being able to extend that to pickup, to delivery, et cetera. So we're very excited especially about the omni-channel opportunity of online grocery.
So I'm hearing a lot about user-centric design, building a holistic customer experience. So let's talk about the user journey. And who is the user? What are the different use cases that you have to think about where you're managing what someone needs in that moment, depending on, whether it's a recurring activity or a one-time activity? How do you think through that customer journey and the complexity of omnichannel?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we talk a lot about, especially within the product organization. And the fact is that we are, especially in an omni-channel world, you can't just think about a specific feature design. You can't, and even though, we have these large teams, and they need to focus, and you need, this person's focusing on the search filtering, this person is focusing on the add to cart button. You need teams that are focusing at that level of depth. And yet, if you design from the bottom up, just looking at one key piece, it just falls apart from the customer perspective. And so we believe that there's really about 7 core missions that our customers are trying to solve for. And we believe our design target, our customer, is the time-starved busy family, which, by the way, anybody in here feel busy? Remember 165 million customers a week shop Walmart in the US. So, it's kind of everybody, which is in many ways, you're saying, but at the same time, it really is, where do we optimize for? We're optimizing for how do we bring low cost to the world and help families save time, live better. And so, but when we think about, so how do you then design for that? Well, we look at it, like I said, we have about 7 core missions. For example, help me feed my family. That is a core mission. By the way, anybody in here doesn't need to eat for the week? Everybody needs to eat, right? So, that core mission of feed my family, there's several journeys that ladder up to that. When you think about, I'm doing my weekly restock, or I'm doing my big monthly grocery buy, or hey, oh my God, I'm out of milk, or I'm out of diapers in the middle of the night, or hand plan a dinner party. These types of journeys are what ladder up to that mission. And we think about which are the journeys that we most want to solve for. And the key is to not solve for just that one particular feature, but thinking about that end-to-end journey. Because even if we do fantastic at search and she finds what she wants, if we mess it up when it comes time for her to go and actually pick it up, or we had to substitute something, then she's going to be angry and her NPS is going to reflect it. And so we have to be thinking about that end-to-end journey and always be mindful of how do we make sure that we don't, sort of do piecemeal, that we really deliver on the promise across the board.
Yeah, and in terms of really what brings the easy factor for them in that life cycle, right? How are we really predicting the behavior, right? Grocery shopping, if I really say, and this is what our research says about our customers, that 65% of their basket is going to be repeat basket. Okay, so that's like, outside of that, there are personal behaviors, there are moments and the events. And so how do we make the shopping experience as fast as possible? Right? It shouldn't take every week 30 to 40 minutes to build that basket. How do we leverage voice commerce, right? So my favorite thing is really, like I have Google Assistants everywhere, right? And we, as a Walmart, has a real good partnership with Google in terms of launching our voice ordering system. As easy as, say that, hey, Google, talk to Walmart, right? So, and when Google talks to Walmart, really, what we are shooting for is building my basket over the period of time so my husband can go and pick it up, So that's what kind of, matters into. But Lucinda, I think, the part that we are doing around predictive basket is the most important one. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so, as we said, it's so much a time-starved busy family. So how do we make it easier and faster and make it just where she feels like we know her and we're making it easier for her? And so one of the key things, there's sort of 3 key steps when you think about online grocery. The first is, how do you help her fill her basket and make sure that she's buying what she wants to buy? And so as Aanan mentioned, 75% is repeat. Right? Or 65% is repeat. We are all creatures of habit, right? Who doesn't have their go-to Thursday night dish if they need it? But at the same time, how do we also make sure that, we are helping her realize like this is something she seasonally does, but also think about what do we know about her? Have we figured out that maybe there's an allergy in her family, or maybe we figured out that she's very organic sensitive and organic focused? How do we help recommend other types of products that are specific to her needs? As well as we think about how do you shop? I make fun of my boss all the time because he's an aisle shopper, even online. I'm like, dude, not everybody's an aisle shopper, right? And when people are shopping groceries, they're often shopping 40 to 50 products at a time. So how do you make it super easy for her to see all these things we predict she wants because she does all the time, but also we think she may want because these are what's in season and these are based on her preferences, and make sure that we make it faster to both get what she wants, but also find those things she didn't even know she wanted. Mm-hmm. And then from there's a whole picking process. But even before we get to that, the fact is, we have to think about when is something going to go out of stock. Because as Anna mentioned, sometimes you start making your basket on Sunday and you check out on Thursday and you pick it up on Saturday because that's just sort of the way of your week. Sometimes we have things that are very fast-moving inventory, situations arise, and we have a great inventory management system, but at the same time, substitutions happen. And how do we make sure in the event that we need to substitute that we haven't broken her basket, that it's not that one item that she can't live without and that she's going to be so angry with us if we don't give it to her? Or how do we make sure that it's the item that is the most relevant for her? Because it's not good enough just to say, here's another milk. Would she prefer to go whole milk, or would she prefer to have organic, or would she prefer to have a gallon instead of a half gallon? There's so many different attributes that we have to consider as we figure out what's right for her versus what's right for you, what's right for you. You all have different shopping behaviors and preferences. As a family, exactly. And that, you throw in the fact that there's more than one of you. It's really complicated as we've been going through and building out these algorithms to make sure that both when she makes the purchase and by the time she picks it up, she's happy with it. There's a whole other step involved too around how do we shop for it.
Right. And so what I wanted to bring up in that line of thinking is this notion of human-machine interaction and how instead of trying to replace the job, how are we actually using AI in order to improve the task or to automate the task or to improve the collective intelligence of the system, right? So how are we thinking about the way in which you are surprising and delighting your customers with the help of your associates and the way in which they interact with the technology that you've built?
Yeah, Rachel, you bring up really amazing points. You may not know that we have 30,000 personal shoppers working behind the scene for all these families, right? So these personal shoppers are really the associates in our store. And in this, smart substitution that we are talking about algorithmically, there is a kind of place for these associates, these personal shoppers who has known their customer. Because remember, even though all these stores around the country, they still have the local aspect to it. And these associates know, that what is really going to be accepted as a substitute for their customers. So how do we really add a aspect of a signal from our associates, this personal shoppers, into the algorithm, which is also taking input from the customer preferences and personal aspects. So that's the human aspect that we call, Rachel, of not just leveraging AI. It's like really a combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence and, merge them, together.
And to make sure we delight the customer. Because at the end of the day, as I mentioned, it is making sure that what she picks up actually fulfills in her needs and the journey that she's on.
Yeah, because the stakes are high. If she's not happy, that has a disproportionate effect on her overall experience.
Yeah, the stakes are high. Substitutions, we spend a disproportionate amount of effort on making sure we nail them, even though because they're so infrequent relative to the broader basket. And yet when we have to substitute, it has such an impact on her NPS and on her happiness with us. And at the end of the day, we believe that if you delight the customer, they will come back. And that it's, if you delight the customer, they will drive that loyalty. And so if we can make sure that when we do have to substitute, that we don't disappoint her, it's really, really important to that relationship and the trust that we believe is so critical to our brand and building that trust with our families.
Another theme I'm hearing is around constantly testing, iterating. And I know that a while ago you had mentioned that that's really at the core of who you are as an organization. Yeah. So it would be great to hear when you're operating at Walmart scale, and you have to make...
It's really easy. So simple. So simple.
So walk us through a little bit about how do you test at scale? What are the different layers and dimensions that you test around? How do you do this in a way that doesn't in any way compromise the environment and the experience for the user?
So, I'm quite new to Walmart. I'm 7 months, into my role. But one of the biggest surprise factor when I joined, what I heard was, and Sam Walton's, this is in Walmart's DNA. Sam Walton came up with this test and learn at a store at a time. He had a store in Bentonville where he would put everything, in front of that customer and make sure that, that is tested properly before he can scale it out to the chain or the other stores. And I come from a digitally native world. right? So where A/B testing frameworks, multivariance testing, and testing anything, before you put it into the production from a customer experience perspective, it's part of it. We don't launch anything without kind of testing it in the labs, testing it kind of in front of a smaller population, and then scaling it out. The complexity that we are dealing with here, right? We say that, okay, you know what, we have models and we are going to put them, in the test, right, with the real customer. So there is that kind of, really a multivariant testing happening at that layer. At the same time, the customer experience is being painted on the top. So you layer that in terms of their test running, from a various experiences perspective. Now, add a third factor to that is, on the associate side of the world, when they're receiving the order, there's a test running, for the associate system also. And then there is a geo aspect of it, that how many stores in a chain that we are rolling out this to. We think from, really how we come up with kind of, what is our right kind of audience that we need to test with, right? And down to kind of, the results that are coming out and the analytics around it. That effort has to be it's layered effort, right? So you really have to come up with something that helps you kind of, understand that, in Salad, how it's really impacting or multi-constraints, in the algorithm.
And I would add to that, I think that, it's both how it informs the decisions on how we design things, but then also how the data then goes in and informs our models and continues to drive those signals so that our models get better and better as we iterate through the experience. The feedback loop has to be closed, as you guys know.
Well, feedback loops are one of my favorite topics. But just in general, when you launched online grocery, what was the response from your users? And then how are you ensuring that you're incorporating their feedback throughout in every part of this testing process and also in the way in which you're thinking ahead about what's next?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's, so I'm also relatively new to Walmart, been here 6 months. And, I used to, in my previous roles, but I've been around retail and e-commerce for decades. And, I've often said that you can't change customer behavior. Turns out, if you're Walmart, you can. And not in a bad way, but just simply the fact of when we put up a big orange sign on the front of a store that says pickup, and you put, lanes there where you can go pick things up, people get excited. And so we look at this and see that, the NPS factor and the delight that we bring to people when we provide this service, because it genuinely saves them time, it genuinely makes their lives better. And I like to say those are the best experiences, the ones that are the trifecta, where it serves a real customer need, it serves a real business need, and it delights the customer at the same time, and it's fun and easy. And so when we talk about this, we've just had enormous excitement with our customers, and we just see so much opportunity to grow in this space, because who doesn't love the idea? Not only are they saving time, but you think about a family. You've got 2 little kids strapped in the back seat, and instead of having to get them into a cart and drive them around, like you can just actually roll up and have somebody bring out everything you wanted. It really does feel like magic. And now we're even thinking about how do we extend it even further, and into the home. You want to speak to that one?
Yeah, no. So it's a best NPS, I would call it that way. And from the customers are really loving it holistically. We made an announcement recently.
So last month you announced in-home delivery. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah.
So in-home delivery is coming up out in fall, right? So
in a few markets, we're not going to get it here just yet.
It's Pennsylvania, Florida, and Missouri. Is that right?
3 markets, right? So it'll be rolling out with that.
Call your friends.
But it's from a convenience factor perspective, when we leverage, our associate base and trust that we put in them. And then we equip them with a camera as they are entering the home, and really kind of, not kind of leaving the grocery outside. When we are dealing with fresh, it's important that it remains fresh. And so, this associate has the trust of a customer to go inside and stock up the fridge, and then kind of, if the customer has something for the return, they have left it, on their side, and they are picking the return up, along this, in that same kind of, trip to the home. And that type of convenience, if we are really looking forward to delivering that this fall.
And I'd say we've been in tests for this, and the fact is, and oftentimes, and with anything with AI and personalization and in-home, people start to see, what about trust? What about the creepy factor? And what we found, number one, we're extremely careful about this. Aanan mentioned, it's always internal Walmart associates who've been there at least a year. They're really well trained, but at the same time, we have the cameras so you can see what's happening. But at the same time, what we're finding is that customers, it's sort of like, before Uber, did you get into some random car that drove up by the side of the road, right? Like nobody would have trusted that. If somebody talked about it, we're like, what we're gonna do? We're gonna have random people pick you up. What? That's hitchhiking. And what we find is now that it is actually, we see the customers, they just go, oh my God, somebody delivered my groceries and they Marie Kondo'd my refrigerator while they're at it. That's pretty magical, and I can't go back to how I did things before. Yeah. And so again, this goes back to actually think about the mission, the journey, because the mission is not I want to go to the grocery store. The mission is I have to feed my family. Mm-hmm. So how can we take so much of the headache and the stress out of that and make sure that we're solving it? So I think the in-home is just such a fantastic opportunity for us to really, again, make our families' lives easier.
So when you're awash with data, which is a very rare luxury, many of us are building machine learning models with sparse data, and it's challenging. But you have an opposite problem, which is how do you differentiate what signals are most important? How do you make sure you're prioritizing the attributes that matter?
And Lucinda keeps reminding us, Kamya, she's part of our team here, and she knows this, that when we have multiple constraints to really optimize for, Lucinda would always pick the customer experience that wins over anything else, because you have, even in smart substitution, you have a really price to optimize for, you have really the cost to optimize for, but among all of them, if I have a choice to say that, do I pick the closest that's going to really kind of, make my customer happy, pick that over anything else. And Walmart's play today is really kind of everyday low prices, EDLP, right? That's what we are good at. So, ultimately we are not going to really fall, too far in terms of any other preferences. Yeah. So that's how, we've been solving it, really biased for the experience.
But even still, we constantly have to be thinking about what are those preferences that we can really figure out and that become implicit preferences as we think about, are you an organic shopper? What's your price sensitivity? What's your brand sensitivity? What's your, how big is your family? What's your sensitivity to quantity? All of these different factors are just so many of the ways, and think about what are the global implicit preferences versus what are category specific. Because my God, you start talking about flavor. Doug and me started about lemon yogurt. What do you replace for lemon yogurt? I mean,
peach yogurt.
but it's the fact is, and it's different for everybody. And so this is where the complexity really is massive. And so that's where that importance of testing and the learning that goes into it and the learning into the model is just it's an ongoing foray. It's an ongoing discovery process, and it's just something that we feel is, like I said, it's so important to get it right, and we're just constantly iterating on it.
Given that you're dealing with fresh produce and the complexity around that, I think fresh produce substitutions must be one of the hardest things to figure out. But you mentioned predictive capabilities. Mm-hmm. So what are you thinking about or what have you implemented in terms of either predicting that something could run out or notifying and communicating with the customer? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's challenging because, as I mentioned, this is not like a moment in time. Usually when they're making the order, it's a very dynamic inventory. It's a very dynamic ordering process. So we're constantly trying to stay ahead of it and making sure that we notify you as soon as we realize, but even thinking about from a predictive perspective, if you're ordering 40 items, we're not going to ask you explicitly to tell us, if you don't have your milk, which kind of milk do you want? That's so painful.
That's not delight.
It's not delight. That is not delight. That's I may as well go to the stupid store, right? I mean, not stupid. I love our stores, but it is, how do we make sure but how do we identify? Because we have all this other data to know. Here's what are the fast-moving inventory items. Here are the ones that are most likely to go out of stock. Here are the ones that are seasonal, and how do you use that to figure out what are the type of items that are at risk, and as well as then figure out which of those do we consider to be basket breakers, because I'm not going to ask you more than a couple of things in a particular order. And so how do we make sure that we are identifying those that are at risk and asking the right questions?
Yeah, 90% precision confidence, is very important in this mix, for us to be really effective in terms of, and Kamya knows how difficult that is, in terms of a predictive basket, that we are not going to deploy it, till it's at least 90% confidence plus, right? Yeah.
It's really hard to talk about groceries without bringing up a subject that's very important to me, which is nutrition, health and wellness. So I know this falls a little bit outside of your day-to-day, but how is Walmart thinking about health and wellness? And are you thinking about anything that might help influence or support overall nutrition for families and for new ways to surprise and delight your users?
I think health and wellness is such an important topic overall in our country. And I think, we at Walmart, I think we take very seriously the role that we can play in this conversation. It's something where, our stores for decades, we've done things like clinics in our parking lots. The fact is we have always seen ourselves as part of our communities and looked at how can we better serve our communities. And health and wellness is just one element of that. So how it as in total. Is how it relates specifically to what we're doing in online grocery. Look, we're not gonna big brother you and start telling you and start like trying to replace your your snack cakes with with vegetables. Like we're not gonna try and and push you. But at the same time, when we start to identify where you have certain where we think that maybe you're vegetarian, or maybe we think that you're gluten-free, or maybe we think that you have different, again, these implicit preferences that we can identify from your behavior, and how do we then make sure that we make it easier for you to shop with those elements in mind. So I think, sort of the, starting with a nudge and then thinking about how do we play a more active role in the future. But ultimately, we care very deeply about how do we make sure that our time-starved busy families can both be fast and effective, but also really giving them better tools for how they live.
When I started, this was a delight factor for me to even realize that Walmart has large selection of organic groceries, so it's really kind of, not just playing in terms of how do I reduce your price, but having right assortment is part of our strategy. Mm-hmm.
Do we have time for a question? Okay. Great. I love it. Question, please. We have a mic coming. 1 second.
Sorry. I'm pretty loud. So no, I was just thinking about, as you go through and make these decisions based on things like replacements, right? I'm out of something. Do you guys already have something that allows you to say, this is where I work, this is where my husband or my partner or whatever works, and here's where I live. If I go in and I want to buy a bunch of stuff of those 3 locations, I won't have to have any substitutions if I go by my office. My husband might have to get one. If we go by my house, I'm gonna have to get 3 and you'll have to ship me something. Like, is that a crazy overload to factor in? Because I'm kind of interested by the idea of somebody putting groceries in my fridge. But at the same time, I like the idea. I mean,
It's okay to be refrigerator curious.
But I do that sometimes where I'm like, oh, I need this, and this is always over at this store. Or, they're micro localities as well. How do you guys index all of that? I mean, is it something that you've considered, or is it like just not worth it right now? I mean, in terms of understanding those kinds of things.
So all the geo signals are part of it without violating your privacy, right? That's number one thing that we care for in terms of that, we are not going to kind of, really know you living here, and here, or going to work here, right? But at the same time, are we optimizing? And, that's the beauty of having a store in every 10 miles. Right. So then you know that how to really optimize that fresh and frozen that is actually kind of sitting in the store, right? So we have an index of, okay, if I'm going to send your order to a specific store, what is their selection, right, of the items, and it always changes, and that's what we were talking about as a challenge or complexity for us. That what is available now, and do we have that data, and how real time, closely can we run this? We cannot run this model, in a silo and then deploy it. It has to be at a certain time, that we can.
I would also say you may be a really good candidate for delivery, because just saying.
Yeah.
But the fact is that we are so we have over 5,000 stores. By the end of this year, online grocery pickup will be in over 3,000 of them. and delivery will be in more than half of those. And so when you talk about delivery, one of the things that we're looking at is how can you make sure that you use delivery to collect all the items and not just be within one store. And so, I think that it's a great question. It's something that we are constantly looking at. Again, we're washing data. We're constantly looking at how do we, make sure that we get to the most delightful experience
the
possible.
right signals to incorporate.
I just know whenever I'm going online shopping for things like this where I'm doing an in-store pickup kind of opportunity, I check every
Of course.
that's important to me.
Of course.
Is it here, is it here, is it here? And then so it'd be really, I could see that being something value though.
Yeah.
I don't know the real-time analytics of that processing on the back end just to say, these are the 3 places where I'm going to go, and then to qualify it and then look and be able to say, oh yeah, this is going to have all of it.
When you go to set your pickup location, right, while shopping for online grocery, we do recommend, everything around you. And when you are ready to check out, at that time also we make a recommendation to you that based on your basket, this is the best store for you to pick.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This is delight. I love it. And on that note, thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Can I ask one?
Oh, do we have Alex or Kevin? Do we have time for one more?
Yes, we're currently at a break right now.
Great. Awesome. Please.
So my question is, it's really easy to get siloed, like your inventory optimization and what you're doing with the delivery and online, but that delivery can obviously be a really good demand signal for your inventory. So how do you keep those models in sync and use the feedback from delivery in your inventory?
Great question.
Yeah, and it is always a layered approach for us, right? And in terms of kind of any where else can we ingest the information from in terms of continuously learning, and if you can explain a little bit in terms of what would be the delivery problem, that complexity that you're talking about in terms of the inventory, you mean like delivering from a right store? Is that what you are talking about?
Basket breaker,
Yeah.
You don't want to do the substitution.
Right.
If that's like the taco seasoning, because you can't make tacos without the taco seasoning, then making sure that the inventory knows, like, hey, we need to make sure we're stocking
Yes.
taco
Yeah.
seasoning.
That- Absolutely. That's the feedback loop that goes into our kind of inventory system, right? And so what we mentioned is there is a multiple learning opportunities, right, over here, so that no one can run in a silo. That's what makes it super difficult for us. But we recognize these opportunities to feed the signals back in terms of our forecasting systems, right? That really needs to understand from these patterns that are changing constantly from a customer behavior, from localized behavior perspective, right? And there is a whole lot of manual systems already built for the system. It's really the automation task that is happening now in terms of leveraging AI and robotics in order to tie those knots together. Yeah.